Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Supporting a Feeling Life. My name is Jonathan.
And I'm Yasmin.
And on these videos we talk about the importance of really learning how to listen to yourself and particularly to learn the language of your feelings. This is something Yasmin taught me a long time ago, something fortunately she stayed connected to from, well, pretty much from when you were born, really, didn't you?
Yeah.
And now we spend our days helping others understand that what we have going on inside of us, particularly on a feeling level, is there to guide, support, instruct and inform us. And today we want to talk to you about some spiritual myths that we regularly come across when people are kind of trying to learn to make sense of their life and learn to grapple with sort of the magnitude of everything they experience. There are some very popular expressions which have been thrown around now for some time.
And these tend to come about when we try and understand things from our mind, when we're trying to work it out up here without just coming to ourselves and trusting what we know.
One of the most popular ones that we hear and see people kind of using as justifications is that everything happens for a reason. Now, you might recognize this is something that you've kind of pondered or even used to describe to something else. There's no other way to dismiss someone's experience, especially if it's a tender or in some ways a dramatic experience, than to tell them everything happens for a reason.
Or it was meant to be, or it wasn't meant to be.
So there are many others, but the other two we're going to focus on today is we want to talk to you about how it always happens for a reason, and it was meant to be, or it wasn't meant to be, affects people in their lives.
Generally, you could say that things happen for a reason as a matter of consequence, as a matter of a repercussion from a choice or decision that we made. So the law of consequence in the universe is very clear. You set something in motion and therefore it will happen.
Correct.
And if you're conscious of that, you can create very consciously in your life.
Yes.
If you're not conscious of that, you might wonder why something happened the way it did.
And this expression can fit nicely. Everything happens for a reason. But
And
we
that
live
reason might be you.
exactly. Yes, it could be. But also we live in a planet of 8 billion people, all trying to create their life consciously or unconsciously. All you have to do is sit at a set of traffic lights and watch one person sort of unconsciously move the car forward to see at least 5 other people do exactly the same thing. And the light's still red. So
we copy.
we do.
We follow each other.
We're influenced, is what we're saying, is that we're so influenced. We're influenced by media, we're influenced by television, we're influenced by there's the social media that comes through. We often do see those lovely little posts that try and explain how life works in a meme, which, you know, can be satisfying to the mind, but doesn't always change the way we feel.
And occasionally it might speak to you as an awareness of something you realise you've done because you've had a need to know or you've had a need to understand. And understanding is very important as we comprehend our life and the experiences that we have. It always reflects back to us what we've set in motion.
So what's been some of your experiences over your years of seeing the downside of people holding tight to these two expressions of everything happens for a reason and it was meant to be?
What I've seen occur time and time again is a sense of guilt. Oh, it's my fault and I've made this happen. And therefore people tend to take responsibility and they get very apologetic. Oh, that was me and I made that happen and I had these thoughts and therefore it occurred. And they're trying to understand the laws of creation and all the teachings that have come out over the years. But it just doesn't settle. And so some people really think, oh, it's me. And they end up feeling guilty. Oh, I should know. I should know. Or they'll just try and make it feel better and they'll say, oh, well, it wasn't meant to be. You know, it just wasn't meant to happen.
We see the consequences of this a lot in our work where people are grappling with experiences in their life, and there's this kind of very strong need inside of us that if we can just work out why it happened, then we might be able to feel better about it. But we really encourage you to consider actually the impact it's had on your energy and what those feelings are telling you really need as a consequence of those dynamics. You remember when some years ago I had that motorcycle accident?
Yes.
Which was, it was dramatic, you know. I think it was one more time that
It was a little close.
I almost went home earlier than planned. Ruptured testicle. Sounds as painful as it actually... It is as painful as it sounds, I should say.
And it was as bad as it might imagine.
Yeah. But the part of the story which is connected to what we're talking about here is that I had people asking me, what did you do to cause this? Why? What was the reason for this to happen? I was happily riding into work on my motorbike, clipping along at a good pace, had my headphones in, singing along to music, came around a bend, and there was somebody doing a U-turn in the middle of two bends.
A truck with a trailer.
A truck
no
with a trailer.
less.
Okay.
In a 100k zone.
And I noticed that there was pretty quickly a part of me which also was lying in the hospital gurney wondering what I'd done to cause this. And I realised something, that the part of my nature, like so many others, which has that background doubt, that kind of question, what have I done wrong?
Or I'm not good enough,
Or I'm not
therefore
good
I
enough.
make things happen in
Right.
a negative way.
You got it.
Yeah.
Okay. And that we've got to be, that's the part we've got to be conscious of, that we're not referencing what's happening on the outside against a story that we've been regurgitating on the inside. And these expressions will fit very nicely with those beliefs. I very quickly, and thanks to your loving administrations as well, very quickly realised I actually hadn't done anything wrong. And there wasn't anything I'd done to cause that particular accident.
No. And in fact, someone else made a momentary decision to do a U-turn, believing that no one was coming and that they would get away with it in time. So if they'd done it 2 minutes earlier, there'd be no collision. If you'd been leaving home 2 minutes later, nothing would have happened.
If I hadn't bought that particular motorbike, I probably wouldn't have ridden into town that day. I mean, we can look at all of the layers that we can justify and explain how something occurred.
That's
but
very,
we make choices, and it's how we then respond to the consequence of these choices that is really the where the empowerment comes. What we found out later was that this particular person had had a couple of reports made on them because they were doing road inspections, and they were drifting all over the place for a couple of days as they're doing these road inspections.
Nearly collided with a local midwife in her car, a couple of other occasions.
So what that exposed was there was something going on for that person which was actually affecting their choices. I just happened to be the one who collided with it. And as I said, 8 billion people on the planet, this is going to happen. We're going to collide with other people's conscious and unconscious energy.
Yeah. There are accidents. And sometimes people think, oh, it's happened because. Yes, it has happened because there was an accident. I'm reminded of a young woman who, a number of years ago now, was driving her car, and she doesn't remember the accident. She woke up in the hospital, but the driver's side of the car was completely stoved in, along with the right-hand side of her face. And because of how she'd been thinking and the things she'd wanted for herself and how lucky she'd felt she was at that time in her life, and she hadn't had any thoughts at all about her looks or what she needed to eat or how she needed to be. She was just happy and thinking, I'm pretty good, that she thought, oh, maybe I was too, happy, and therefore it got taken away. And she's still been trying to work out why it happened in the process of healing what it's meant to her. And what I pointed out to her was that actually she wasn't the one who had caused the accident to occur, and she doesn't know what was going on in the driver's consciousness that day. Whether they had a momentary lack of attention, whatever it was an accident. And we do collide physically. we know we collide mentally and emotionally with people all the time.
All the time.
We're not all paying conscious attention. We're not all present.
Absolutely. I mean, we're talking about the dramaticness of accidents, but even think about when words are said unconsciously and how they impact you. You didn't do anything to cause those words, but the way they impact you, you will feel. And that is about the other person. It's about their unconscious energy or the pain they're in. And so there is the world is full of examples where this idea that everything happens for a reason just simply doesn't work. But what we want to encourage you to consider is how you can quietly, over time, have less and less of those unconscious experiences. How and why?
Exactly. And I think that what we also, just following on from what you said, Jonna, is that we can say things sometimes or do things and then don't realise what we've done until someone says something about it and we go, oh, I didn't mean to do that. So when we look at mean to, we're often unconscious of what we're doing and we didn't intend to have that effect, or we didn't intend for something to occur. And when that thing happens, we wake up a little more and we become more conscious, more self-aware, hopefully, to be very careful about our use of energy or our use of words. But I've seen how when we don't intend it consciously, we didn't mean for it to happen, which you could also add to it wasn't meant to happen.
Absolutely. I think that's a wonderful, clear insight, actually, that shows the levels of consciousness that we're operating from. And so I think this is another way that we can be very hard on ourselves and we can be very hard on each other by applying these sort of misguided spiritual ideals of everything happens for a reason and it was meant to be, because actually... No,
we have to be very careful, because I'll use an example that I share with my trainees quite a lot. A 2-year-old child who is badly physically or sexually abused didn't need or ask for that to occur. They didn't need that experience. Every child, if we believe in love and unity and health and happiness that we're all seeking to have and provide and nurture in life, a child deserved to have trust, to feel secure and loved, did not consciously, unconsciously, spiritually put their hand up and say, oh, I'd like that experience, thank you.
There was no contract written. My God, that's another one. We'll talk about that another day. But there was no spiritual contract that was occurred.
We have to be very careful here, because what we can end up doing to ourselves or to others is, oh, it was your fault. You wanted that. And if we put the blame on the innocent child, what about the perpetrator? What about the abuser? What do we say or feel about them? Because it becomes very victim focused, that it was your fault or the victim's fault, not the perpetrator.
Yep.
And that's where it falls down, because then what happens to our standard, our morals, our values around nurturement and a right for love and security in life? Which
kind of leads to that bigger question, which is, why do these things happen? And this becomes, a religious argument, all sorts of kind of ways people tangle up in why do cruelties and terrible things happen on the planet. And what I know Raman's taught over and over again is that these things are very much in human nature, but they are an opportunity for us to respond with compassion, an opportunity for the world to wake up and actually start saying, no, this is not okay.
And we do need to see what things are teaching us about, so that when we have an experience occur to us that isn't okay, we have an opportunity not to say, what did I do to cause this, but to actually have a look at where we've just believed that we were safe and comfortable and someone has abused that trust. Where our awareness wasn't quite there. In the case of children, they are innocent. So they're not going to mentally be thinking, oh, I better be careful of that person, because they don't feel good. And generally children do know this anyway, and we do know what feels right for us anyway. But we don't give children permission to speak up or say, no, don't do this, don't touch. So it's very, very important for us overall to have a look at Not beating ourselves up, but looking at what we learn from the events that occur.
So
Instead of, sorry, darling, instead of,
you're on a flow. It's good.
instead of it wasn't meant to be,
Yeah.
actually looking at that and going, well, actually, that really wasn't okay.
Yeah.
You know, we try and find ways of making it all right.
All the time. But we're often only doing it mentally, and we're not taking into account how it impacts on our heart and on our emotions or those of others. So if someone is listening and they notice that they have a perpetual question inside themselves saying, why does this happen to me? Why does something continually repeat in their life? What advice would you give them if they're not to go and try and rationalize it by saying everything happens for a reason?
They absolutely need to pause and acknowledge what has occurred and accept it. Because until we accept it, we're fighting the fact that it has occurred in the beginning. So we do need to take a few moments to acknowledge how that feels and why it feels so difficult. And if it's something that's repeated, to really have a look at what we've struggled to accept. What is it about what occurs and the reality of that upsets us or frightens us? It might be that one person continues to treat you badly and you refuse to accept it, which means you might need to change something in your life. You might need to listen to yourself and absolutely leave that situation. You could use that very same example in any situation in life, really.
So if things are repeating and you are trying to understand why, then as Yasmin said, it is an opportunity to look at how we respond. So really the thing that we want you to take away from today's video is very much about understanding how little we really can control, how little we actually have control of in our life, but how much we can influence when we're living from this more clear, conscious space of feeling inside. And we can be much more open and conscious of how we respond to those experiences that occur in our life.
Well, we can't control others. We can't control what others do and how they are, but we do get to choose and create for ourselves. But we can only do that if we're listening to ourselves and to what really feels right for us.
And not having control on how others are, that doesn't mean that in any way it was you who deserved to be treated that way or you deserved to have that experience. So we really encourage you to consider looking at this sort of dynamic through a more compassionate lens, through a more loving lens, and through a kinder lens, because there's a consciousness which has existed for a long time, which has had an intolerance to the suffering and has had an intolerance to the hurt. So there's been a kind of a stoicness which pushes us into a rational, logical way of seeing things, which feels satisfied that, well, it's all happened for a reason, or it was just meant to be.
Suck it up, buttercup.
Pretty much, That's pretty much what it is.
Pull it together.
Pull it together and get on with it. Well, what we're inviting you to do is instead feel it. Feel how it impacts on you. Feel what it's really talking to you in that place of acceptance. And acceptance is not saying it's okay. It's just saying that this is real. What do I want different in my life? And from there, you'll feel that feeling and that voice that will actually influence what really needs to change.
I'd love to encourage you to just spend the next few days being really conscious of how you interpret the things that happen in your life. What filter does it go through first?
Sounds wonderful.
And that might just guide you. It might just help you to realize there's another choice in here for you.
So until we speak to you again, we encourage you to stay close to your heart and open to your feelings.
Until next time.